right, so like Daniel, this is a little bit of a new thing for me, and I'm just sort of like, I don't know, going with the flow and the theme of the day. So to the extent that you can be forgiving, if this isn't as rehearsed as standing behind a podium, which is what I normally do, I would appreciate it. So as she mentioned before, not only have I had a career in politics, but I, of course, am not just an IAVA executive director, but also a member. I went to Iraq twice myself, and now spend my entire sort of professional existence sharing the stories of our generation. Something that I was telling Kristen last week is perhaps the most fulfilling job that I've ever had. But when we were on the phone, she told me, well, you know, Allison, this is like about today, I'm brave. Like, how are you brave? You can't go and do what you always do and tell stories about other people. So in our conversation, I told her that, you know, one of the things that I've been tangling with and has been sort of a beautiful challenge throughout this experience is the fact that, you know, I'm advocating for a generation that I belong to. So I've had to figure out how to own my story as a part of that advocacy, which has been not only a great challenge, but also required individual acts of bravery along the way. So after I left our phone conversation, I also then realized that, wow, I have to do this without a script, and this is a little different than what I was thinking. So I put pen to paper to sort of work out what I was going to say and realized that I was putting together a story about how I tell stories and my story, but not necessarily getting to the real goal of today, which is about today I'm brave. And the reality is that if I talked about war, that wouldn't be me talking about being brave. I think that there are a lot of people who are in awe of those of us who went to war, but for me, besides a few butterflies before I went out the gate on a mission, it really wasn't a thing. And a lot of people give me a lot of credit for, I work in the world of politics, I go out there, I go on TV, there are trolls on Twitter, and I take a lot of that flack as a part of my work, but for me, again, like fighting for other people is kind of in my blood. So the story I'm going to tell you today starts in 1989, which is the year that my mom left my dad, who is an alcoholic, 2 months after my youngest sister was born in February. So in April, she got up the courage, a courage that I'm still gaining the proper appreciation for, to leave my dad, move in with my grandmother, and then we moved into what I would refer to, for those of you who've watched the movie Now and Then, kind of like the Gaslight District, where nobody else's parents were separated or anything close to it, let alone with somebody dealing with abuse or substance abuse. So that was when I first learned to start hiding pieces of myself. I would go to school. I definitely didn't talk about that. My dad was always on business trips. And unfortunately, that began a cycle that went throughout the rest of my life. And it was aided in part by other forces in my family as well. When my mom remarried my stepdad, my mom sat us down and said, we're thinking about changing everybody's last name to the same last name. So a last name that is now very dear to me, Jaslow, and it's pretty catchy, so I'm going to keep it for the rest of my life, and I adore my stepdad. But the messages that were sent to me was basically, you know, you should be ashamed of where you've come from to this point. And the better thing to do is just sort of like make you into Doug's daughter and all of your sisters, and we can just sort of move on with life. So anyway, taking steps forward, and I will fast forward you to 1995 when, my mom sat down with me, and after my dad had gone like in and out of our lives for a couple of years, we went down to Q Island, South Carolina every summer to meet with my grandparents. And this particular summer, my dad wanted to see all of my sisters, but she gave the choice to me, which I'm not sure was necessarily a burden that I should have been asked to bear, but I did. And made the decision to not see my dad, even though he was somebody who I had missed very dearly and was waiting for the very moment when I get to see him again. And decided that on behalf of my sisters, because I didn't want my sisters to have to deal with this guy who basically was like in and out of our lives and maybe would send a letter or somebody would send a Christmas gift on his behalf every once in a while, that the worst thing that could happen to them was to get a relationship with him like I had and be missing somebody all the time. So I told my mom it wasn't a good idea. We should go see our grandparents, and Dad just shouldn't show up this time. All the while, you know, I was secretly waiting for my dad, for me to be 18 and be able to see him again and hopefully him to have his act together. Well, in the spring of 1996, I had one of those, you know, conversations where I was sat down in the kitchen of our house where I knew exactly what I was being told. And that was the day that I found out that my dad took his life. So, unfortunately, what I lost then wasn't my dad so much as it was the hope of when I thought I'd see him again. And even though there was hurt all around me, I decided that I wasn't going to deal with that hurt, that I was going to stuff it down, that I couldn't ask for help or wouldn't ask for help because I needed to be tough for everybody else. And not talk about the hope that I had lost, and then the struggles that I was going through. So something that wouldn't surprise you is I rode an emotional roller coaster through the rest of high school. But my ability to compartmentalize ended up being a great tool. I went to war. Even though I lost buddies, I was able to pack up an inventory, a fellow platoon leader's stuff after he died and send it home to his family. I went to Iraq a second time, and though a lot of people struggled with it, like it just wasn't a struggle for me. I was able to put my feelings in a box and, you know, Charlie Mike as we say it, and continue with the mission. When I got out of the military, I got into politics, and my ability to sort of put other people first and put my story and my opinions aside made me one of the best at what I did. I was able to craft messages and think about people's personal brand or their personal story or the story of their constituents, and help share that and help people get elected, help people win, and help people be successful in what is a very tricky and tough game of politics. And then the thing is, though, along that way, I didn't realize that in addition to all of those other habits that I created, like I was actually silencing myself and silencing my own voice. And to the extent where when I took this job, I don't know that I actually knew what that was. And it still is a struggle for me, not only to embrace my voice and learn my voice, but I realized recently that one of the biggest struggles is as I explore that, and as I try to own that, as we all know that we should do, and as Daniel, standing in our truth is one of the most courageous things that we can do. To me, in some ways, it feels like a push and pull against my own values or the values that I established in a professional world and the image that I created. I like being known as somebody who is incredibly selfless and wore selfless service on a dog tag around my neck. But, if you're talking about your own story, that's not quite what you're supposed to be doing, right? I'm tough. How should I be talking about my hurt and my struggles, and where am I supposed to ask for help? But I also realize that integrity is an incredibly important value to me. And even more important is authenticity and the courage to be authentic. And so to really be true to those values and to take those on, I have spent the better part of the last 18 months, and congratulations, you're experiencing this right now. Really owning my truth for better or worse, even if I feel like there's a struggle with some of the values that I hold really dear, because I don't know that I can actually share other people's stories or ask them to tell me their stories so I can share them if I'm not willing to own my own. And I think what I'm really doing at the end of the day, and today why I'm brave, is because I am accepting or trying to accept the radical notion that my story is as valuable as all the stories that I share.